Hey Matt, how are you doing?
Good,
Welcome
good.
to our wonderful podcast of no name that we still haven't decided what we're going to call it yet, but we'll get there. And maybe some of our listeners have got some ideas as we go forward. So I guess tell our lovely audience a little bit about yourself.
Hey guys, right, my name's Matt Muckham. By trade, enterprise tool and architect, but I've been in IT for must be approaching a couple of decades now. But I have a general interest in passion, I guess, in anything tooling.
Wonderful. And I'm Austin Pearson. I've also been in the tooling space for 19 years now, for IBM and Science Logic, and been lucky enough to work with some amazing organisations in their transformation in the tool space. So excited to share a lot of what we've got to talk about, really. Cool.
So I guess maybe just a slight background on why we're talking in this format. So Austin and I have been talking for probably approaching a year or so, maybe a bit less, but all around the topic of tooling, which isn't a very common subject, I don't suppose. ITSM maybe, but maybe not tooling as a whole. So we talk and we have sensible conversations. So there was an idea that we would share our conversations with more than just ourselves and record it. So in order for us to do that, we're doing this format of some form of podcast with currently no name, as Austin mentioned there. And then each week we'll be covering off various topics. We've got a long list to discuss so far. And then as we move through those topics, we'll be adding new ones on. And then as we mature, perhaps there'll be some guests, maybe you guys, who will join us and have frank conversations around certain tooling topics that will be relevant for other people within the industry.
Yeah, that's a good shout. If you're listening to this, connect with us on LinkedIn, drop us a message with topics you'd like us to cover, and we will do our best. So this week's topic, let's get into it, is what considerations should an organisation make before buying their next tool? And I suppose, actually, before we get into that, Matt, what would you define a tool as? What are we talking about here in terms of tools?
That's a good question, Phil, on the spot. So for me, anything that manages or supports a process or an environment. So it could be something which is service management focused that underpins the process. It could be something which watches something, monitors it. It could be something which fixes something from automation. It could be something which just looks at it from a security perspective, but ultimately that supports the business objective, whatever it might be, whether it's a service management process or another process, but ultimately the technology behind it that supports it.
Awesome. So things like ITOM and monitoring and automation and ITSM, those kind of things.
All those sexy ones.
Yeah. I've never heard anyone call monitoring sexy. So
you know what? I did a LinkedIn post this morning, like suggesting that we'll do this, and I think I used the word sexy in there, and I thought I don't think I've used the word sexy in this industry before. But you know what?
It's AI ops now, so that's anything AI ops that's sexy.
Yeah, cool. So, I mean, the whole terminology. This may be a conversation for another topic. Is a terminology around AI ops? Like, what is it? You know, going back to the basic BSM, that old wheel. You know, I know where I stand. Start throwing in these fancy terminologies. I just need to go back to basics sometimes. But yeah, all good stuff.
That is a great challenge because I get that all the time. That question, what is AI ops? Crazy one. So, okay, so let's start with the first question then. So what considerations do you make before buying your next tool? So shall we start with what's the mistakes people typically make when they're thinking about buying their next tool?
I mean, look, the first thing is don't buy the tool. Don't buy the tool. I think certainly there is often, I don't know, maybe it's 50-50 or even more, less need to buy the tool because you might already have it covered. We'll cover that for more detail, but ultimately, don't buy the tool would be the first recommendation. There's lots of other avenues to pursue before you got to pull your purse strings out.
That's an interesting one. So what is it that people typically aren't doing with their existing tools that they should be looking at first before they think, hey, I've got some gaps, I need to go out to the market and look for something else?
It's visibility for the most part, isn't it? So an estate will have a myriad of technologies, and anywhere we go, whether it's private sector, public sector, new startup, well, maybe not new startup in some cases, they'll have an array of things on the shelf that fulfill an array of capabilities. And I think in some cases, how those things have landed in the environment, the estate, the environment, has come in by different people, different times. So the awareness of this thing with its certain capabilities isn't really fully aware to the person now making this financial decision to buy this other thing, which has been talked about at a conference or whatever else. So they're getting this great idea for this, we need to deliver this feature, this function, this whatever else. In actual fact, there might be some things they already have in the estate they haven't really fully utilised. So I think the first thing to consider for sure is, I say don't buy flippantly, but what's in the back garden first? What have we got available to cherry pick from before we fully exhaust the need to go and spend some cash?
That is a really good point, right? I don't know anybody that gets the value out of their tools, and I think, you know, the mistake that I see most people make is they don't really understand the problem that they're trying to solve and the problems that they really have. So when I go and somebody says, hey, we really need to buy a new tool, so we've done this wonderful spreadsheet of all our requirements, and those requirements are, I need to be able to see Kubernetes version blah 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 blah, and then I need to be able to build a dashboard that looks like this in this color and yada yada. And I'm like, okay, that's a load of wonderful stuff, but what's the problem you're trying to solve? How are you going to be different as an organization in 12 months time? And unless you answer that question, you go round and round in circles to what you were describing just then, of basically you buy a tool with all these technical capabilities, you implement it, and then 3 to 5 years later everyone's forgotten about it. Most people hate it because they're new people in, they didn't choose it, yada yada, they never really got any value out of it that was measurable, and then so they go, oh, let's chuck it out and then do exactly the same thing again. With another tool.
Plenty of reasons why, some good, some maybe not so good, why an organisation will get to the point of buying a tool in the first place. And it could be golf course stuff, it could be I owe you a favour stuff, it could be I'm the new CTX and I'm going to change the world, so I'm going to buy all the stuff. Well, it could be a number of things. But moving from our first point to the second one is, if you are going to get to the point of buying a new tool, and your point around like the actual business value aspect of it, put some metrics behind it. You don't need that feature of this color X and this nice graphic Y. If there's a nominal figure to getting this product, if it was a monitoring solution, we need to bring our instance down, or if it was a build and tear down situation, you need to do it quicker. If it was a pure service management activity, you need to make the call handling slicker with a metric behind it. But once you start steering it to a numbers activity, there becomes less, what's the right phrase, hearts and minds. You're not really thinking about the soft stuff, and I would like this feature. Actually, does it move that metric from 0 to 2? Okay, that is a good reason to get that product. And I think once you start putting it into a metric perspective, even at this stage, before you try to prove the value of the tool once it's in use, this at the stage before you've even considered going to market, what metrics are we trying to achieve, which ultimately links back to the business value, then that's a nice space to start, because you're starting it with the right intent.
I'm 100% with you there, Matt. That's like, unless you know what you need to move the needle on, there's no point doing anything, because you're just going to have yet another tool in your arsenal to manage, and crazy. So definitely agree with that. So we know what not to do, what the mistakes that people do make. So where would you typically start in trying to understand where you need to make an improvement in your tooling space, right? What are people, when you're going to see them, they're going, we need better tooling, and you go, okay, let's start evaluating what your problem is. Where would you start?
So historically, being a techie, I'd be all in the weeds. All in the weeds. I want all these features because this operations manager needs this, and this admin guy needs that, and this developer needs this, and I'd be all in that lower level, not to be derogatory, but in that lower level conversation where I'm like looking at all the shiny stuff to build up. Actual fact, where it's a better place to start always is going back to that business at the highest level, not to sort of try and rub shoulders with the CX level, more to say, what is this business trying to achieve? We are trying to help our customers achieve this. We are trying to drive down this. We're trying to make more bottles, whatever the business objectives are. And I'd almost expect some sort of, maybe waterfall, I don't know, but some visual representation of what are those high level strategic activities you're trying to achieve. And then we can start to work out how we can connect to the things that we need from a technology point of view. So if I need to open this door 50 times a day, what technology, maybe at some point, if it would make sense, would help me get to the point of opening and closing the door? But in those same conversations, when you start to scrutinize it, you're also then asking the question, do I need to open the door 50 times a day? Why don't I take the door off instead? So I think starting at the high level, so what, gives the objective of, when we do get down to the point of technology selection, whatever it is, and that's including looking in-house and what have you got, it's working out, is the thing worth doing? And the only way to do that, as well, and also helping sort of from a sales cycle point of view, if you're the vendor selling a product in some cases, it's, if you're answering that business so what, it's easier for it to be executed and say, yes, it's going to move us forward, it's going to move the needle from a business perspective. So starting at the highest level, not in terms of organization, but the business goals and objectives, that's black and white, should be done in every conversation.
Matt, I love you for saying that. That's awesome.
It's a bit weird.
Absolutely right from my heart. Right? Because that is absolutely it, right? So an example, I worked with a large bank in South Africa over the past year. They had been, well, over the past 4 years. For the first 2 years, they were thinking, hey, we need a tooling change here. We've got all this old stuff, doesn't really work for us. We can consolidate some stuff and all that sort of thing. Went out to market, did the usual stuff, talked to Gartner, Forrester, got all this, their big spreadsheet of stuff and yada, yada, yada. And 2 years later, they were still looking at technical features and functions between whatsoever, everything. And I came in and said, okay, right, what are you trying to do as a business? They were like, what do you mean? I was like, right, well, you've got to start with the business stuff. And the business stuff for them was they wanted to retain their position as the largest digital bank. And to do that, they needed to start understanding when their services were down and where their customers were getting bad experience with their digital services, rather than finding out from Twitter, which was their current monitoring tool. And the board had promised their shareholders that they were going to improve their profit over the next year, and therefore they were on a real cost containment drive. So straight away there you've got, like, we've got to do this visibility thing to improve our customer experience so that we can stay with our position as the biggest digital bank, and you need to reduce your costs at the same time. Those are two really good starting points to say, okay, can we do that with our current tools? How does that apply to what we're doing in IT and our objectives? And the other thing it really brings is a culture change, right? Because otherwise, I just find that so many organizations just buy a tool and do the same thing and the same thing. Yep. When everybody involved in a tooling project is aware that actually we need to drive this profit for shareholder value, and we through reducing our costs, and we need to retain our position as the biggest digital bank, that is so much different than, oh, I need to monitor Kubernetes more, right? Yep. And then nobody cares about monitoring Kubernetes more. They're just like, let's do these things. Don't know what you think.
No, I think
you've got any examples.
The sort of top-down example is that trying to marry up to what the business objectives are in the first case.
Yeah.
What is surprising, I suppose, is when we start having those conversations around trying to match up to those business goals, those business objectives, that they've always been there, but most of the time when you get down to that technology level, the connection's lost, the link from getting this thing to delivering that is somewhat lost, and it might exist in the grey matter of the individuals in between that chain. But ultimately, if you're going to be making financial decisions, and this isn't just to buy a tool, I suppose, it's to modify it or to exit it in some cases, we should be able to see some very clear connection back to that business goal. And even though the data is already there, because most organisations will have their values defined, their goals for the year or the 2 years, rare do you see that connection made, for whatever reason.
I totally agree. And I think it's just that people have always bought tools in the same way all the time. And even when you get somebody new come in, they've still bought tools in their way forever. So they just go and do the same thing they've done time and time again. And people need to start breaking the cycle and really marrying up the value. And I think one thing that hasn't really helped in the industry over the last few years is these kind of generic ROI kind of tools that a lot of vendors use.
Love those.
And they just come in and go, here we go, our magic tool says we're going to save you 3 million quid.
0.
And we've got no idea how to measure that, but you should, give us $1 million and we'll give you 3 million back. And then people go fall for it, and then they never see the return.
I have a good bugbear with that scenario. So I appreciate from a vendor perspective, you need to represent some value. You've got limited information to make the decision on. Get it. And some spreadsheet or some fancy something's going to exist and something will be created. Cool. There's questions and answers on whether or not those metrics are real in some cases, and it's certainly difficult, I think, depending on the industries you've been involved in, proving value in and outside government organisations, because the metrics are different, right? They don't want to make money, they want to save X, Y, Z or whatever it is. But the problems with all of those calculators, I rarely would see the output matching up to what the expected input would be. Now, if I was to ever create a technology company, a tooling company, whatever call it Enterprises, I have no idea, I'm making this stuff up. How cool would it be? And if the industry was like this today, it was so different. If a technology vendor didn't just do some cool ROI, and maybe it's super granular, right? And it's dead on and it's going to be definitely executed. But they didn't just sell the technology based upon this ROI calculation and the perceived value. Instead, if you're in the normal world, as in the IT world, if I buy, and now I've got a book, if I buy this book, I'm not happy with this book, I'm going to send it back, right? That's it. I'm going to get my money back. How cool would it be in the software technology industry if there were such things as money back? I mean, properly money back. Don't worry about paying for our tool. We'll wait for our 12-month cycle or whatever practical to be worked out and the value to be realised. And if it's not, it's on us. And that would change the industry.
Big subject.
Change the industry.
It definitely will, for sure. So we said we were going to do 20 minutes for our first one. We're 18 and a half minutes in. So I'm just going to summarise what I think we've talked about today. Which is what are the mistakes that most organizations make when they're buying a tool? You said don't buy the tool. Firstly, you need to understand what metrics you're trying to achieve and whether you could do that with your existing tool set. And I said, absolutely, let's understand the problems that you've got as an organization that you're trying to solve, which led us nicely onto the second half, which was, where would you start then? And both of us agreed, you've got to start with the business priorities. Forget about the IT stuff. What are you trying to move the needle on as a business? And then let's see if everybody understands that, you can create a bit of a culture change and see if you can then either do what you need to do with your existing tools or go to market for a tool that is going to help move the needle on the business stuff. And the final thing we said was, don't believe third-party value calculators. We hate them. They're never going to get there. I think that was a fair summary. Matt, anything you want to add?
I mean, honestly, I could just continue. I've wrote down a few points. No, we won't, because we said we wouldn't. But easily I could see a version 2 of this, because at the stage we then decide you're going to do it, there's still the pre-stage activities you need to do in order to execute. That is another session in itself. So perhaps that is another topic.
100%. So I think there's loads of stuff that I've made loads of notes to, and we'll unpack them on the next one. It's terrible. We're both two people that are super passionate about this, and we can go on and on and on. next time we will unpack this a little bit further. If you've got suggestions of what you want to hear about, then get them in. But thank you very much for watching. Matt, I need to sort my home studio out to look as cool as yours. Yours looks way cooler, so that's my something I've got to do for the next time. But yeah, thank you very much, everyone.
See you all, guys. Bye.
Cheers.